Okay, here's a question for you. What if your DNA held this hidden story stretching back through Romans, Dacians, Slavs, Turks, Jews, Roma, even Mongols,
Yeah.
all interwoven into who you are?
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
Yeah. Welcome to our deep dive into Romania's genome. It's this really powerful, ancient, and often, well, misunderstood genetic crossroads in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is to kind of unpack a stack of fascinating research studies that reveal these incredible layers of history written right into Romanian DNA.
Think of it like uncovering Europe's most intricate family tree, maybe.
Exactly.
And it is truly captivating because, geneticists, anthropologists, they consistently describe the Romanian gene pool as one of Eastern Europe's most layered, most diverse.
Right.
It's been profoundly shaped by centuries and centuries of migration, war, conquest, cultural collision. You know it.
So not exactly a simple story.
Not at all. And this rich mixture, well, it hasn't come without controversy either. I mean,
Yeah.
It challenges those traditional ideas of ethnic purity. It raises profound questions about national identity, and it even sparks debates tied to, ancient myths and sometimes modern politics, too.
Okay, so to really get this mosaic, we have to journey back, right? Sort of strip away the layers of time, get to Romania's deepest genetic roots.
Precisely.
So before the Romans even showed up, you had the Dacians, these Indo-European people in the Carpathian region.
That's right. The Dacians were there first.
Then, around 106 AD, bang, Roman Empire conquers them. So what did that initial Roman imprint actually mean for the genes that came after?
That's where the DNA evidence gets incredibly clear. Genetic mapping confirms that a really significant portion of modern Romanian Y DNA.
Okay, the Y DNA, that's the paternal line, right? Passed father to son?
Exactly, almost exclusively father-son. A big chunk of that can be traced directly to Italic Roman lineages.
Interesting.
We're talking specifically about the R1b haplogroup. It's a major genetic lineage, like a big branch on the family tree. Tells us about deep ancestral origins.
And how common is it?
It's present in over 30% of Romanian males today. That's a very tangible genetic footprint of that Roman influence. Really powerful.
30%, wow. That is significant. But like you said, it's layered, so that's just the first layer, isn't it?
Just the first layer.
After the Romans, who else? What other major populations left their genetic signatures behind? What does the DNA tell us about, say, the Slavic influence? Was that big?
You're absolutely right to ask. That Roman layer, it was then built upon heavily. Recent genome-wide studies, these look at all your DNA, not just the Y chromosome.
The autosomal DNA.
Yeah.
From both parents.
Correct. They show that around 35 to 40% of Romanian autosomal DNA has a strong genetic connection, a close affinity with Slavic populations.
35 to 40%. So
Yeah.
even more than the Roman Y DNA signal.
In terms of this autosomal measure, yes. It powerfully reflects centuries of migration and settlement, coming in from the Northeast.
Okay.
And we can't overlook the smaller but still distinct amounts of Turkic and Central Asian markers that also appear, reflecting historical echoes of things like Mongol invasions and later Ottoman domination. They left their mark too, albeit smaller.
So it's not just a few dominant threads then. It's like many threads woven together. What does that kind of extensive mixing actually do to a population's genetic makeup overall?
Well, it creates incredible diversity. There was a big study in 2020 published in Nature Genetics.
Okay.
It found that Romania has one of the highest heterozygosity rates in the Balkans.
Heterodot-zygosity. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Simply put, it's a measure of genetic variation within a population. Think of it like having different versions of the same gene. A high rate means lots of variation, which indicates extensive historical mixing or admixture.
So high heterozygosity equals lots of mixing in the past.
Exactly. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it's not just some genetic curiosity. It really hints at a unique resilience.
How so?
It suggests a population that has, through centuries, consistently absorbed and interwoven these diverse genetic threads. It creates a truly robust, adaptable human tapestry.
That's a really profound counter-narrative to those purity myths you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. It flips the script.
Yeah. Okay, that's a huge shift in perspective. And as we dig deeper into the numbers behind this, some of them are truly eye-opening, aren't they?
They really are.
For instance, you mentioned the Slavic connection. What does the data tell us about the specific impact of those Slavic migrations? Any key markers?
Yes, beyond those broad strokes, one really striking finding is that approximately 33 to 37% of Romanian men carry the R1A haplogroup.
R1A, okay. Different from the Roman R1B.
Very different. This particular haplogroup, R1A, is specifically associated with Slavic and also Indo-Iranian migrations, so it solidifies the huge impact of those movements.
Right, adding another big piece to the puzzle. Are there other distinct, maybe less expected ancestral groups that show up clearly in the numbers?
Yes, definitely. Another significant finding is the measurable percentage, roughly 5% of Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry.
5%. Where is that mostly found?
It seems especially concentrated in certain urban centers, like Aiai and Bucharest. And this links back directly to major waves of Jewish settlement that occurred, particularly from the 17th to the 19th centuries, left a clear genetic imprint.
Okay, so that makes historical sense. Now, as we keep uncovering these layers, some connections emerge that are, well, really surprising and often incredibly sensitive topics. Take, for instance, the presence of Romani ancestry. What does the genetic data reveal there? Because that's often a difficult subject.
It is, but it's an essential part of the story. Studies show that somewhere between 8 to 10% of Romanians have traceable Romani or Roma ancestry.
8 to 10%. That seems quite high.
It is significant, and this figure is often underreported in social contexts, due to historical discrimination and ongoing marginalization.
Right.
So this genetic data, it powerfully reflects a very complex history. Migration, yes, integration sometimes, but also, at times, historical erasure. It's all in the mix.
This naturally brings us, then, to some of the deeper controversies surrounding Romanian identity, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Because on one hand, you have these sort of nationalistic narratives promoting a pure Dacian origin or maybe unbroken Latin continuity from the Romans.
Right, those narratives are quite strong in some circles.
But then the genetics paints this incredibly mixed, blended picture. How wide is that gap between the narrative and the genetic reality?
The gap is, it's significant. Scholars, geneticists, they emphasize that the extensive intermingling with Slavs, Bulgars, Hungarians, Turks, Roma, many others, makes the whole idea of ethnic purity a scientific myth.
A scientific myth, that's a strong statement.
It is, but it reflects the evidence. It's a narrative that unfortunately persists, in some textbooks, some political rhetoric, but it just doesn't align with the data. The science shows this constant dynamic blend, not some isolated static lineage.
And as you mentioned earlier, the Romani population is a key part of this complex genetic picture, yet they often face huge challenges, marginalization.
A very difficult history.
So where does the genetic reality collide most sharply with the social stigma they often experience?
It's a very challenging, very sensitive area. Studies show these unique South Asian haplogroups, markers like M5H1A1, are present in that 8 to 10% of Romania's population with Romani ancestry.
Okay, linking back to their origins in the Indian subcontinent.
Exactly. And this genetic reality, this undeniable shared ancestry for a significant portion of the population, directly confronts deeply ingrained social stigma and prejudice.
Wow.
It truly makes Romani inclusion a hot-button issue. You have scientific fact about shared heritage running right up against long-standing societal biases. It forces a conversation, or it should, about who belongs and how history is perceived versus how it actually unfolded genetically.
Yeah, a conversation that's clearly still needed. Then there's Romania's more, shall we say, mythical association, Vlad the Impaler, the whole Dracula legend.
Yes, Dracula. Can't talk about Romania without mentioning Dracula.
Right. Does this historical and cultural narrative somehow, trickle into genetic discussions, even if it's purely anecdotal or like pseudoscientific?
Surprisingly, yes, it does. You'd think not. But the enduring power of that Dracula legend has actually led to some, let's call them fringe pseudogenetic theories.
Like what?
Theories about vampire traits, things like supposed links to certain blood disorders, or even heightened nocturnal activity being somehow genetic and tied to that legend.
Seriously? People propose this?
On the fringes, yes. Now, let me be absolutely clear. None of this holds up under any scientific scrutiny whatsoever. Zero evidence. It's vital to debunk these ideas.
Okay, good.
But what's truly fascinating, I think, is not the science of these myths, but their enduring cultural power. It just speaks to how readily folklore can shape public imagination, even today, and how people, maybe driven by curiosity or, I don't know, a desire for a unique identity, might look for biological anchors to these legends in their own DNA, even if those anchors aren't real.
So it's a prime example of that tension between hard genetic data
Yeah.
and these persistent, maybe romanticized narratives.
Exactly. A really stark example.
So, okay, moving beyond these specific genetic markers and definitely debunked myths, what does all this mean when we think about broader human traits? Are there, for instance, any unique psychological or cultural traits that researchers are cautiously exploring in the context of Romanian genetics?
That's a crucial question and also a very sensitive one. Researchers are approaching it with extreme caution, as they should.
Understandably.
They are exploring things like epigenetic adaptations.
Epigenetics, so that's changes in how genes are expressed, not changes to the DNA code itself.
Precisely. Changes in gene activity.
Yeah.
And the idea is that maybe historical trauma, centuries of wars, plagues, harsh communist rule, constant migration pressure might have led to subtle epigenetic shifts.
Which could affect what?
Well, potentially things like stress responses, maybe emotional regulation, perhaps even immune profiles, adaptations to cope with repeated hardship. But, and this is incredibly important to stress, there is absolutely no direct, scientifically proven link between nationality and innate intelligence or specific behavioral traits. That's dangerous territory, 19th century thinking.
Right. Essential distinction.
This research is about subtle, potential adaptive responses over generations, not fixed national characteristics. Very, very different.
Okay. And does that genetic and historical mixture, this unique position as a crossroads, does it seem to contribute to any particular strengths or adaptive qualities that are observable?
Well, if you look at the mix of influences, Eastern European, Western European, Balkan, etc., and you look at psychological studies, not genetic ones per se, it does strongly suggest a population with remarkable adaptability, high rates of multilingualism historically, a capacity for cultural code switching, navigating different norms and expectations.
Which would be pretty essential for survival, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. These seem like key traits for surviving centuries of shifting borders, changing empires, different regimes ruling over you. It speaks, I think, to a resilience that's possibly embedded in that complex history and maybe reflected in that genetic diversity we talked about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so to really pull it all together now, if you had to summarize the core insights, what do you hope listeners take away about Romania's genetic story?
I think the main takeaways are pretty clear, and they push back against simpler narratives. First, it's not about purity, it's absolutely about hybridity, mixture.
Okay. Hybridity, not purity.
Second, it's not about isolation. It's fundamentally a story of survival through merging, through adaptation, through incorporating new groups.
Survival through merging. Got it.
And finally, it's not really about ancient myth, although myths persist. It's a living, breathing story of how empires rise and fall, how cultures clash and blend, but how people ultimately remain and adapt, constantly redefining themselves.
A living story written in DNA.
You could say that, yes.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? In this age where, DNA testing kits are everywhere, uncovering personal histories faster than ever, Romania's genome really invites us to question, doesn't it? Do we define who we are primarily through bloodlines, through these ancient genetic threads? Or is it more about the choices we make, the cultures we embrace, the societies we decide to build together?
A fundamental question.
What do you think? Have you taken a DNA test? Did you discover surprising ancestry you didn't know about? Do you believe genetics is the main thing shaping national identity? Or should culture, shared values, and individual choice matter more?
It's complex.
It really is. This isn't just a discussion about genetics, is it? It's a profound story about belonging, about complexity, about Europe's deeply interwoven roots, and maybe about how we understand identity itself.